International Gaming Standard Association conversations. The IGSA conversations are just that, conversations between various gaming industry professionals discussing a specific topic. And they're intended to be informative and to generate questions. I'm Peter de Rad, IGSA's president, and today we have with us Mark Pace, who is the managing director of GSA in Europe. Hi, Mark.
Hello.
Today's conversation topic is an introduction to one of GSA's reporting standards, which can be of significant value to both the operator and suppliers. And it's called the Regulatory Reporting Interface, or RRI standard. GSA will also be hosting a 1-hour Zoom session with Q&A on how IGSA standards make data reporting more efficient. But for right now, let's start discussing RRI and Europe's online gaming reporting standard. Hello, Mark. In one of our previous conversations, you touched on the work that you and GSA Europe have been doing with the European Commission, and more specifically, with the European Committee for Standardization, known as CEN. Can you talk a bit about what that project is all about?
Sure. While I can't go into a great deal of specifics, I can certainly provide some background information on what's being done, if that's okay.
Oh, yeah, great. Perhaps you can start by describing why the EC asked CEN to create the standard.
Sure. So the EC, or the European Commission, commissioned a study a few years back that determined that regulatory reporting was becoming an increasing challenge for both regulators and suppliers. And this was something that we talked about when we were discussing RRI. So this was, again, the same conclusion that GSA had also found. So whereas GSA had started to work on RRI, the EC was still working with its expert gaming group to do their research.
So in fact, that GSA, Mark, and EC's gaming expert group arrive at the same conclusion. That's a good thing, right?
It is. And truth be told, when GSA Europe became aware of the EC's project with CEN, we thought to become a liaison organization to CEN so that we could share our learning. And I mean, GSA was, what, like 2 years ahead at that point?
So that was why GSA Europe donated the RRI to CEN. I mean, it was to help jumpstart their work, right?
Exactly. We wanted to share with them what we had already done, even though the scope was a bit different. And what I mean by that is that RRI was addressing data reporting for land-based and online gaming, whereas the EC's mandate to CEN was to create just an online reporting standard.
Yeah, and GSA has to take global needs into consideration when creating a standard, while CEN was focused solely on Europe.
That's correct. Although, to be honest, the differences there are more nuanced than you might think. I mean, ultimately, online gaming occurs in very much the same way, and by and large, with the same types of games, which generate, the same data.
So, Mark, beyond the fact that one focuses only on online and the other on all types of gaming, what other differences are there?
Okay. Well, first, let me start by saying that the similarities by far outnumbered the differences. And that's a really good thing because, many gaming suppliers are looking to provide their platforms and games wherever online gaming is allowed, not just in Europe. So perhaps the most pronounced difference is that RRI supports real-time reporting, but the online gaming reporting standard, as it's currently known, does not. So in the CEN Technical Committee, the decision was made to focus only on near real-time and periodic reporting. I guess the differences really beyond that are related to some data elements and to some technical stuff related to how the extensible markup language, or XML, is used.
Okay, can you maybe describe some of those without getting too far into the technical stuff?
Okay. So RRI uses XML attributes while OGR uses XML elements. Now, that might be meaningless to most people, so let me try and explain it a bit more. Both attributes and elements allow data to be grouped into subcategories, but they do it a bit differently. So XML elements appear more like a nested structure than attributes do.
But that's a matter of style, Mark, right?
I would say yes, but others may disagree. I mean, another difference is how you indicate whether a data element is required or not. So for example, when you're using attributes, each data element has a restriction. And one of those restrictions could be use. Use could be optional or required. When you're using elements, each data element also has a restriction, but to specify whether a data element is required or not, you use something called minimum occurrences or maximum occurrences. So these are usually referred to as min-oc or max-oc. And they give you a bit more control on the number of times a value can be reported for a data element.
Hey, Mark, you're getting on the borderline of getting too techy now.
Okay, thanks. So I'll try to use an example. Let's say a person has two surnames, right? And you wanted the surname value reported, but you only wanted one. Well, then you would set min-oc to 1 and max-oc to 1. So minimum 1, maximum 1. That means that at a maximum, only one value is reported. With attributes, you would just say required, and then you'd get them all. So that's an example of how min-oc or max-oc gives you a little bit more control. Here's another example where XML elements and min-oc and max-oc come in handy. Let's say a jurisdiction absolutely does not want a data element sent to it, right? They can set the min-oc value to 0 and the max-oc value to 0 as well. And essentially the XML parser will interpret that as do not send.
Okay, I think you might have crossed the line for some of our audience members. But
okay, to be honest, there's only one other technical difference that I can think of. The rest really has to do with the header. Sorry, that has to do with the headers, and it's not too complicated. The rest, like I said, is some data element stuff. But I'll try and keep this pretty simple. So in RRI, the header contains something called a report type attribute, and essentially that specifies what report the data that it follows it is for. And again, remember, when we say reports, we're not talking about headers and columns and footers and all that stuff. We're just talking about a data file. Now in OGR, the type of report is inferred from the data elements being reported as opposed to having that report type attribute. Again, one might argue a matter of style.
You also said there are some differences in data elements?
There are. Let me give you an example. So RRI has a data element called money, right? Now, money, as makes sense, is a numeric value that represents an amount, a value. It does not tell you what kind of currency it is, though, right? It just tells you the value of money. The currency is provided in a separate data element called currency code. OGR does away with money and instead uses a complex data element called amount currency. Now, a complex data element just means it's made up of multiple data elements. So in this case, amount currency is made up of the data element amount, which is the same as the RRI money, a value, a quantity, and then the data element currency, which specifies the type of money the data element is reporting on.
So in essence, the same data is being reported just in different ways within the XML schema.
In that example, absolutely. There are other data elements where RRI limits the number of values, whereas OGR does not. I'll give you one example of that. For example, RRI has a data element address line 1 and address line 2. So you can only have 2 address lines using RRI. OGR just has address line as a data element, and that address line is a recursive field, meaning that it supports an unlimited number of values being reported. I'll give you another example. Person's name. When a person's name is being reported, OGR uses given name, middle name, and family name. Each one of those is recursive. So as many given names, middle names, and family names as you might have, they're reported. And they're reported as one per row. RRI has given name and last name. We're not using middle name. And while those are recursive as well, again, multiple instances, those multiple instances are separated, are on one row separated by a comma.
Well, it seems like they're very similar.
They are. In fact, you could almost say that OGR is like a subset of RRI focusing only on the online gaming vertical.
Mark, do you think both will ever be identical?
That's a good question. I think that RRI will always be slightly different from OGR, and again, because it has to support the needs of the gaming industry globally. So there may be things required, say, in North America or Australia that are not in Europe. And for that reason, I don't think that, OGR would have to support that stuff. So that's why I think they might not really ever be identical. But from a programmatic standpoint, I'd suggest that those are kind of minor differences,
Right. Well, excellent. Thank you, Mark. So let me try and summarize. RRI and the OGR both use the extended markup language, or what we refer to as XML. Right. And the differences we can see now is whilst RRI supports real-time, near real-time, and periodic reporting, the OGR standard supports only near real-time and periodic, right?
Correct.
RRI uses XML attributes in its schema, whilst the OGR standard uses XML elements. This may be argued as a matter of style, accepting that XML elements use the minimum and maximum occurrence restrictions, as you explained. And these appear to provide more control for when a value has to be reported and the number of times a value is reported for a specific data element.
Right.
And finally, there are some data element differences, but these are not significant and more often than not result from the fact that OGR is focused on Europe's needs, whilst the RRI standard is taking global gaming industry needs into consideration.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Hey, Mark, any guess as to when OGR in Europe will be released?
Unless I'm mistaken, the EC's mandate requires it to be released by 2021, so next year. That's pretty much the goal.
Okay, excellent. Good to know, Mark, and thank you for your participation. To our audience, thank you for listening. Please send us your questions and comments by contacting us, and information on doing so can be found at our website, igsa.org. Until the next conversation, thank you.